All right, welcome to today's Explainer. We're diving into a topic that's honestly just as fascinating as it is deeply, deeply hidden. When most of us picture Tokyo, we instantly think of this flawless, high-tech utopia, right? But what if I told you there's a whole other reality lurking literally just out of sight? A reality baked right into the architecture of the city's digital spaces. So let's jump straight in and uncover the dark reality of Japan, inside Tokyo's cyber-homeless epidemic.
Okay, so think about the illusion for a second. The Tokyo we see in movies is pristine and incredibly futuristic. We're talking the blinding neon lights of Shinjuku, the buzzing anime mecca of Akihabara, and extreme economic wealth everywhere you look. That's the face Tokyo proudly shows the world. But right alongside that, running totally parallel to it, is a pretty brutal reality. We're looking at a severe housing crisis. That isn't spilling out onto the sidewalks. Instead, it's hidden away behind sliding doors, existing in near complete silence inside the city's countless 24-hour internet cafes.
Which really brings us to the core question we're unraveling today. What hides just feet away from Tokyo's brightest neon lights? Just think about that for a second. The folks we're talking about today aren't pushed away into some distant, marginalized district. They're right there. They're separated from all that extreme wealth by literally just a few panes of glass and a sliding door.
Let's get into Section 1, Inside the Cyber Slum, the claustrophobic reality of a parallel universe. So, the term you really need to know here is net cafe refugees, or in Japanese, neto cafe nanmin. Let's break down exactly what that means. In Japan, internet cafes, or manga cafes, are next level. They're incredibly well-equipped, offering unlimited soft drinks, massive libraries of comic books, and private little booths. Originally, these places were just meant to be a cheap, convenient spot to crash for businessmen who, maybe stayed out of it too late and missed the last train home. But they've completely morphed over time. Today, they've become a form of permanent housing for the urban poor. These individuals aren't out sleeping on the pavement. They just don't have a permanent address. They're surviving day in and day out inside these digital cubicles. And their entire daily reality is defined by a single number, 2. Now, we're not talking about 2 rooms or even 2 beds. We're talking about 2 square meters. That's roughly 21 square feet. Just imagine for a moment trying to fit your absolute entire life into a box that size. To put that into perspective, a 2 square meter space is barely long enough for an adult to lie down flat. Everything you own, your clothes, important documents, everyday essentials, has to be crammed right in there with you. But here's the kicker, and honestly, this is the most isolating part. These cubicles don't actually have roofs. The ceilings are completely open, which means zero acoustic privacy from your neighbors. You're sitting in this perpetual, artificial glow of a monitor with no windows and absolutely no natural light. You hear every single cough, every sigh, every tiny rustle of a plastic wrapper, all layered over this constant, droning hum of computer cooling fans. And yet, even though you are surrounded by literally hundreds of people, there's a super strict culture of enforced silence. You hear everyone, but you speak to no one. So you're probably wondering, how do you even physically sustain yourself in an environment like that? Well, survival basically hinges on the cafe's bare-bones amenities. Residents are relying on shared communal bathrooms and coin-operated showers just to maintain basic hygiene. As for food, their diet is largely cheap, prepackaged meals grabbed from a local convenience store, or they're just making do with the free instant soup that comes out of the cafe's drink dispensers. It's an entire existence completely dependent on commercial infrastructure that, quite frankly, was never designed to support long-term human living. Which brings us to Section 2, the economic catalyst. Why exactly is this happening in such a wealthy nation? To really understand how this vulnerable group came to be, we actually have to rewind to the 1990s. When Japan's massive economic bubble finally burst, it completely rewrote the country's financial rulebook. Before that crash, the standard expectation was secure, lifelong corporate employment. But post-1990s, companies had to slash costs, and that led to this massive explosion in precarious part-time and temporary jobs. Fast forward to today, and we're looking at a growing class of workers known as freeders. These are folks stuck earning minimum wage, with zero job security and absolutely none of the corporate benefits or safety nets that the generations before them just took for granted. Now, a totally fair question to ask is, why don't these freeders just go out and rent normal apartments? Well, the financial barriers are just staggering. Securing an apartment in Japan demands a genuinely absurd amount of upfront cash. We're talking 4 to 5 months of rent required right out of the gate.
And that includes massive standard deposits, guarantor fees, and this very specific thing called key money, which, by the way, is basically a traditional, non-refundable cash gift that you just hand over to the landlord for the mere privilege of renting their space. Look, for a temporary worker scraping by on a daily wage, trying to save up 4 to 5 months of Tokyo rent is, quite frankly, mathematically impossible. They simply don't have the margin in their budget to stockpile that kind of cash. So the internet cafe, which requires zero deposit, no guarantor, and no background check, suddenly stops being a quirky choice. It becomes the only mathematically viable option they have for a roof over their heads.
Moving right along to Section 3, a trap with no exit. The relentless daily grind. Let's walk through the actual mechanics of this trap step by step so you can see exactly why breaking out of the cyber slum is near impossible. Step 1. Because you're living in a cafe, you don't have a permanent physical address or a utility bill in your name. Step 2. In Japan, much like anywhere else, when you apply for a secure, salaried, full-time job, you have to provide a permanent address. Without one, securing that job is incredibly difficult, if not impossible. Step 3. Because you're locked out of full-time work, you're stuck relying on temporary, low-paying gigs, which means saving up those massive upfront apartment costs we just talked about is off the table. All of which drops you right into Step 4. You're completely stuck. You just have to relentlessly grind out temporary shifts day after day, solely to earn enough cash to buy another 24 hours in your 2-square-meter wooden box. It is a perfect, vicious, closed loop.
And that brings us to a profoundly sobering thought. It is an invisible crisis hiding in plain sight. Think about it. Millions of tourists fly from all corners of the globe every single year to marvel at Tokyo's incredible wealth and cutting-edge tech. They stroll right past these bright, super colorful storefronts, completely oblivious to the fact that entire communities of incredibly vulnerable workers are quietly trying to survive in the shadows, literally just feet away from them. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with one final question to chew on. What other hidden realities might be lurking behind the wealthy facades of our modern megacities? When we're staring up at the gleaming skyscrapers of the world's richest cities, it is really worth asking what entirely different systems of survival are operating just out of our line of sight. Thank you so much for joining me to unpack this incredibly complex topic. Keep asking questions, always look past the neon lights, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.